Right now, there are an estimated 200,000 problem vehicles actively being sold in Canadian used car markets. The scary part is most of them look completely normal. Odometer Rollback is the entry-level scam in Canada's used car market, but it's anything but harmless. The Canadian Automobile Association warns that as many as 1 in 3 privately sold used cars could have a tampered odometer, though the original study is nowhere to be found. Still, the pattern is clear. Odometer fraud is rampant, especially in Ontario and Quebec, where the private market is massive and oversight is weak. The tools are cheap and the risk is low. For as little as $200, anyone can buy a handheld programmer online and rewrite the mileage stored in a car's electronic modules. Modern vehicles keep mileage not just in the dashboard cluster, but in the engine control unit and sometimes in the transmission or body modules. A quick scan with a basic dealer tool can reveal mismatches if you know to ask. Most buyers don't. Dealers and private sellers count on that. The average Canadian car racks up about 20,000 kilometers a year. If you see a 7-year-old sedan with 40,000 on the clock, that's your first red flag. The only way to know for sure is to demand a full module scan. Pull the mileage from every control unit and compare. If the numbers don't line up, walk away. Paperwork and history reports can miss this entirely. The reason this matters goes beyond resale value. In a country where winter salt eats brake lines and sub-zero nights punish engines, rolled back mileage hides real wear. That means you could be trusting your family's safety to a car that's already past its prime. Without a federal lemon law, and with provincial laws that barely touch private sales, the burden is on the buyer to catch the scam before it's too late. Flood cars are the next rung up the ladder, and the paperwork is even more misleading. In 2013, the Calgary flood hammered Alberta with $1.74 billion in insured damage. Thousands of vehicles were written off as total losses. You would think that would be the end of it. Waterlogged wiring, corroded brakes, mold in the carpets. No one wants that risk back on the road. But the reality is, a salvage title in one province is just a temporary obstacle. With the right connections, a car can be shipped east, re-registered, and show up for sale in the Maritimes with a squeaky clean title. The loophole is called title washing. Here's how it works. Alberta flags a car as a flood write-off. Someone alters the VIN or fakes a bill of sale, and the vehicle lands in New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, where there is no mandatory flood damage disclosure. A classic example is the 1962 Chevrolet Impala VIN 21847174827. Flooded in Calgary, declared a total loss, then quietly moved across the country. It passed inspection in New Brunswick, went up for sale in Nova Scotia, and only got caught when police spotted the VIN had been tampered with. The seller faced forgery and fraud charges, but most cases never see a courtroom. This is not just an old car problem. Modern SUVs and sedans have made the same journey, cleaned up, replated, and sold to families who have no idea what is lurking under the carpet. Maritime provinces are a favorite dumping ground because the law does not force sellers to mention a flood past. Insurance records vanish in the shuffle. The only way to protect yourself is to demand the original province's paperwork, not just the current registration. If the seller cannot provide it, walk away. Flood-damaged cars rot from the inside out. In a Canadian winter, one hidden short or corroded brake line can turn a bargain into a death trap. A blank accident section on a vehicle history report does not mean the car was never hit. It often means the damage was never reported. In Canada, insurers routinely settle minor and even moderate collisions off the books, leaving no official trace for Carfax or any other registry to pick up. If a previous owner paid out of pocket for repairs, or if a small shop fixed the car under the table, the accident disappears from the paperwork. That is why buyers are lulled into a false sense of security by a clean report. Consumer lawyer John Foreman puts it bluntly, Ontario's Consumer Protection Act gives buyers a way out if there is outright fraud, but the caps on damages are so low that most dealers just treat it as a cost of doing business. In Quebec, you can go after the full loss in value, but Ontario's system lets a dishonest seller walk away with a slap on the wrist. The problem runs deeper than fines and paperwork. Carfax admits their reports rely on data from insurers, police, and repair shops, but there is no legal requirement for any of them to share full accident details. A fender bender in Saskatchewan can vanish by the time the car is registered in Ontario. Without a federal lemon law, buyers have to fight province by province, and the burden of proof lands squarely on the person who just handed over their savings. When a car's accident history is invisible, so are the risks hiding under the paint. Salt doesn't just stain your boots in a Canadian winter, it eats cars alive from the bottom up, turning family sedans and work trucks into silent death traps. Road crews dump millions of tons of salt every year from Ontario to New Brunswick. That salt gets blasted into every seam, weld, and bolt underneath your car. The science is simple but unforgiving. Salt and water accelerate electrochemical corrosion, especially at weld points where metal meets metal. Over time, even a thick steel frame can thin to paper. You can't see it unless you crawl underneath, but the first sign is often a snapped brake line or a crumbling suspension mount. Failures that don't care if you're driving 30 or 120 on Highway 401. Freeze-thaw cycles make it worse. Water seeps into cracks, freezes overnight, and pops welds apart. By spring, what looked like a solid undercarriage in the fall is riddled with rust blooms and flaking steel. Dealers know most buyers never ask for undercarriage photos, and most provinces do not require a real structural inspection for private sales. That is how rusted out cars keep circulating. If you're buying used, demand clear, detailed photos of the frame, brake lines, and mounting points. If the seller hesitates, walk. A rusted underbody is not just a cosmetic issue, it is a life or death risk every time you hit the road in a Canadian winter. A rebuilt title is supposed to mean the car was written off, repaired properly, and put through a full safety inspection before it is allowed back on the road. The inspection process is a patchwork. What passes in one province might never make it out of the shop in another. The CBC Marketplace investigation in 2019 put this to the test. Reporters took vehicles that had been declared total losses, repaired and certified as rebuilt in Alberta, and ran them through an Ontario safety audit. The results were damning. Cars that sailed through Alberta's checklist were flagged for major safety failures in Ontario, including frame misalignment and brake problems that would never have passed a real inspection. The checklists themselves are not even the same. Alberta relies on private garages with no province-wide standard for structural checks. Ontario's process is stricter, but even then a rushed or careless inspection can let a dangerous car slip through. The lesson is brutal. A single provincial safety certificate does not mean a car is actually safe. For anyone buying a rebuilt or write-off vehicle, do not just trust the paperwork. Demand a third-party frame and structural inspection from a mechanic you choose, not the seller. In Canada, the only real defense against a bad rebuilt car is your own DUE diligence, because the law is not going to protect you when the frame snaps at highway speed. Manufacturer defects are the hidden landmines of the Canadian used car market. These aren't one-off lemons, they're model-wide failures built right into the vehicle. Take the Ford PowerShift transmission fiasco. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians bought Focus and Fiesta models from 2011 to 2016, only to discover the dual-clutch gearbox could shudder, slip, or fail outright, sometimes at highway speed. South of the border, American owners won a settlement that covered far more repairs and offered bigger payouts. In Canada, the deal was narrower, leaving many drivers with little more than a software update and a pat on the back. There is no federal lemon law here. If you buy used, you are told to check recall records yourself and hope the last owner bothered to fix the problem. A car with an unresolved manufacturer defect isn't just a hassle. In a Canadian winter, it's a hazard you won't see coming until it's too late. Grey market imports are the final boss of Canadian lemon cars. Vehicles brought in from overseas, often Japan, with paperwork that looks official but does not stand up to a real inspection. In 2022, Transport Canada seized more than 40 Japanese domestic market performance cars at border crossings from Blaine to Detroit. The reason? Falsified compliance stickers, tampered vehicle identification numbers, and missing safety paperwork. These were not just cosmetic glitches. Speedometers were in miles, not kilometers. Headlights did not meet Canadian standards. Side impact protection had not been tested. If you crash one of these cars, your insurance can walk away, leaving you on the hook for the damage, or worse. There is no federal lemon law to force a recall, and there is no national database to warn buyers. If a seller cannot show you a stamped Transport Canada compliance form, walk. No paperwork, no deal. That is the only rule that matters when the risks are this high. Right now, a clean title in Canada means nothing if the system is built for loopholes. With no federal lemon law and patchwork provincial rules, the real risk is on our roads, not on paper. Until the law catches up, every buyer is a test pilot. Stay sharp out there.